All right, are we good to go, staff? All right, council, are we good to go? All right, the time is 6:02 p.m. I'm calling to order a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025. And council, we will begin today with public comments before going into our regular staff reports. So if you wish to speak to council at this time, please step up to the podium and state your name and begin to address council.
Mayor, council members, the last city council meeting, I mentioned to you that I had discovered these documents pertaining to the history of the city of Sunset Valley, the land transfers from 1835, before Texas was even a part of the United States, or still part of Mexico. These are fascinating abstract documents. I think they should reside with the city, though, and not an individual property owner.
Is the microphone on? We're not sure we can. Is there a red light over there?
I'm sorry?
It's on.
Oh, it's on. Okay, yeah. You may want to speak, stand a little closer.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
I'm sorry. But I'll start over. At the last council meeting, I mentioned to you, and I think I even gave you a copy of one of the abstracted titles that I had found that the previous owner of my property gave to me. And it's a very interesting history of the title transfer to our city from, as I said, 1835, which is when Texas was still a part of Mexico. And I think these documents really should be reside with the city as part of our city's records, rather than one individual property owner. So I'd like to, if you'd like to have them, donate these records to the city of Sunset Valley. I'm not sure why the owner of my property had them, but it's probably a good thing he did, because back in 1976, the city government was pretty disorganized at best, and who knows what would have happened to them. But in any event, these are really interesting documents, and I would like to donate them to the city if you'd like to have them.
That's a really generous offer, and we would gladly accept those documents. I appreciate that. If you could just bring them over to the city secretary, Melissa, and then we can make sure that we find a good place for them, and hopefully we can digitally archive them as well. It would be my intention, so that there's a history of those preserved.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Sandy Cox, 14 Sunset Trail. I have a concern about the, it's item 13 on your agenda, the schematic design for the Uplands Park. I've not participated a whole lot in that. I think we've been over and over the Uplands for so many years that it's sort of an old topic. But I did read and look at the plans, the plans 1, 2, and 3 that were put out, and was impressed that they all looked good. However, my concern is less with the plans and more with the process. There was a meeting for people to come and comment on those plans. I was not able to attend, but I've been told that the preferred plan, most of the people supported plan, was a plan that did not include a pavilion. However, it now seems that the plan that is under consideration does include a pavilion. So again, I'm more concerned with the process. What good is it for us to fill out surveys, come to meetings, and do our citizen input if the input is pretty much ignored? If we're going to say, oh, we support such and such, regardless of how many people show up or do participate, then I would hope that that would be honored. And if it is not, then there's a real loss of trust between the council and the citizens. And again, that leads to more, why do we bother to participate? Why should we care if we're not going to be able to have our voice recognized and actually even followed if there's a definite direction that has been expressed by the citizens? So again, I'm not advocating one plan over another, but I am advocating and concerned about whether or not when the citizens do voice an opinion, that is not the opinion that is then being considered. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak at this time? All right, we will move on to agenda item number 3, which is staff reports, beginning with the administration report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Just a quick note, my apologies. So, Council, if you didn't get a chance or didn't see the information, there are 4 comments on the Engagement HQ site for agenda topics tonight. 3 of them are related to agenda topic 11, and 1 of them is related to agenda topic number 14. So if we get a chance, either during the meeting or if we take a break, it'd be good if you haven't seen those already, to review those comments as part of the public comment process. And now I'll hand it back over to the City Administrator.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll just highlight a few items on the admin report. Happy to announce that GovBuilt permitting software has officially launched and it is live. So that launched last Friday. We'll be putting out some information with the newsletter that publishes this Friday with just some general sort of permitting FAQ, or highlighting the permitting FAQ page that's on the website, and also some information on how to register. So if residents are going to be applying for projects, they'll need to create a user account on GovBuilt, or if their contractor is submitting the permit applications, the contractor will need to create an account on GovBuilt. So, and we'll be doing a demo when Jerry is on vacation this evening, but we'll be doing a demo of the software at our next meeting, July 15th. So, the departments are presenting their budgets to the Budget and Finance Committee. Admin, court, and public safety was presented last week, and next week, Public Works, all the various Public Works Department budgets will be presented. So that is going along smoothly. The FY23 audit, I know there was some delay for a variety of factors that we've discussed with you, but fortunately the auditors are available, and we're at a point now with the rebuilding the data that we lost. So they have the final field work scheduled for June 16th through June 18th. And also an update on the HR management consultant. So I issued an RFP, not a formal RFP because all proposals were to be under 50,000. I issued that back in April. I received 3 responses. However, I decided to reissue the RFP so we could get more, and I changed the RFP so that whoever submits must have experience working with a local government. It used to say preferred, but I changed the qualifications and experience to require experience with a small local government entity. So that was just reissued today, and responses are due by June 27th. So I hope to have a proposal to bring back to you all on July 15th. And again, the main goal of that is the HR manual modernization and rewrite. And finally, the city secretary has plans that the records management project is underway. We have, of course, the summer interns, so we've got some interns, an intern that will be helping out at City Hall, which will give our front desk person, Alina, additional time to work with Melissa on really getting a good inventory of our records. We want to delineate records that need to be permanent. We want to get them organized so that we can have those ready. So when we are ready to issue an RFP for getting those digitized, we're only digitizing those that are permanent records, and that records we indeed need to keep. And then we'll also have boxes that have destroy dates on them. Most are, it's a 5-year, most records are a 5-year retention schedule. So we're going to have all those boxes organized that will eventually need to be destroyed, and we feel it's best not, if they're going to be destroyed in the next couple of years, there's no need to to digitize those. So more info to come on that. And that's all I wanted to highlight. So any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Rosengard?
You mentioned something about HQ engagement. So the software that we're getting, nothing is changing on HQ?
No.
Is it HQ engagement?
Engagement HQ, EHQ.
Engagement HQ. So
Yes.
nothing's changing on that.
No.
There are some people that cannot get in, I want you to know. And I heard from one of them today.
Okay. We've had that issue before, so if a resident is not able, for whatever reason, to either register or to post a comment, they're more than willing to submit it to myself or to the city secretary, and we can post it. We've done that before where we've posted on behalf of, the resident.
It
Oh, we
shouldn't
did it
have to
today.
be that way, though. We got this new program so
right.
that people can directly communicate, and we
We-
can then read it online without having to go through you, and then you have to send it to us.
Right. We have we'll have the communications and events coordinator perhaps check in with Granicus. I think we were due for a check-in call with them, right? So yeah, we'll bring it up with Granicus because that is the software provider, so.
Correct. Thank you for hearing me.
On that note, also, I got a call today. Someone tried to go in and forgot their password. And I guess it says, you can't just like say, I forgot my password and reset it, apparently. And it said they would get an email with information on a new password. And they were still waiting when I left the house, so
Okay.
I'm not sure how that works,
So
but it'd be
there's-
good if
so-
people could just like change their password
Right.
without having to get a ticket written up.
All right. So there's posting issues, password issues as well.
Other questions for the city administrator, for the city administration report? Right, moving on to Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the summer youth program kicked off this week, so you'll see a bunch of young people out working on various city projects this week. The majority of them have been out on 37 Lone Oak, doing some mesquite removal, post removal, and getting prepared for an event we have coming up on June 14th. So on June 14th, we are doing a grow zone kind of activity where we're going to be setting up, there's an enclosure, exclosure, I guess, depending on which side you're on, where we're going to be testing out different plants to see what will grow and what are going to be really pressurized by deer and not be really suitable for the area. So we'll be doing that and just teaching a little bit about prairie plants and stuff out there. That is going to be at 37 Lone Oak at 9:30 in the morning on June 14th. We also have, we're wrapping up some of the larger CIP projects, so a lot of the work on ERW is complete, finalizing everything with Savannah Trail. The Brody water line is completely operational, and the 6405 Brody should have water service over there. The Stearns Lane water line is pretty much complete. We'll be taking samples and getting that one up and running as well in the next week or so. And then the Country White water line, we are waiting for a meter to come from the city of Austin so that we can do that installation and complete that project. In addition, you can't really see it right now, but the playground is being installed back behind City Hall. It's just holes in the ground right now. So the playground equipment will be going up, and you'll be seeing that happening soon. So City Ball backyard is underway, so we're excited to get that completed. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Councilor Rosengarten?
Sorry. Arts Commission report, May 14th, second bullet. I'm sorry, is that your department? Whose
No.
department was that? Caitlin? May 14th, second bullet, last word, is this word supposed to be decision?
Discussion.
Or discussion, okay. A decision is final, a discussion is not. So change that in the report. And then there is a report, Carolyn, on May 8th. Have you talked about that? Public Works report?
No, I'm
Okay, I'll wait till then.
Okay. Yeah, I can go over those. So the planning and environmental and the public works report are on there. Oh, yeah, so May 8th was the planning and environmental meeting. Did you have a question about that?
It involves both planning and environmental and public works meeting.
Sorry. Which one did you want to, did I leave something on there that shouldn't have been on there?
Okay? Yeah, there is a typo on one of them.
Okay.
But what, on public works, May 8th, second bullet, and then second bullet within the second bullet below that, it says area can also be included. That should read area can also be included.
Okay.
But what I wanted to talk about, because it's in the reports here, and I'll bring it up again when the agenda comes, is that you can see discussion in public works was allowed to have full discussion, and you can see P&E was not allowed to have full discussion. I have talked to a P&E member, and the member said that they were told they could only talk about the phases, and this is regarding the Uplands project, whereas Public Works was allowed to discuss everything.
No, Public Works talked about value engineering different parts of the project. That's kind of what they were talking about. And that was kind of the direction that went on for that, to look at phasing for planning and environmental and looking at value engineering pieces of it for Public Works.
Do hear me. Someone from P&E said they feel like they weren't given the same information that they could bring regarding this subject. When they read the Public Works report, they felt like they were allowed to discuss more than P&E was allowed. So I'm going to mention this again. Okay.
Yeah, and that person wasn't at the Public Works Committee meeting, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional, Mayor Pro Tem?
To follow up on Councilmember Rosengarten's comment, I also heard from a member of P&E who felt the same thing. And I went back, and the impression I got from them was they were told they could only talk about the phases.
Correct.
And I went back and listened to our city council meeting, and the directive was for P&E to consider those phases, but not to restrict themselves to those phases. And then the member of P&E thought that was unfair, that was not actually council's direction.
Other questions for the Public Works report? All right, we'll move on to public safety.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just have two items today. They both kind of deal with Jones Road. Tomorrow is the last day of graduation ceremonies, and I have to say that the AISD did a great job with traffic this year. I think that by staggering out the graduations 4 hours apart and actually charging for parking, it just seemed things went smoother. We didn't get all the complaints. There wasn't the long traffic jam, so I mean, that's good news to report. I expected it to be worse with charging, and it worked out better. And then the second item is, I didn't have it in my report, but for the past week now, we've started to get lots of complaints about these e-bikes and juveniles since school is let out. And I noticed even in Austin and out in the county, I'm hearing the calls come in. So I'll put something out in the newsletter, and we've had complaints here in Sunset Valley. I suspect we're going to get a lot more because there's these class 3 and 4 bikes that are more like what they used to call mini bikes, or at least mini motorcycles, and they've been blocking traffic and going in the shopping center and doing wheelies and driving on the trail. So I'll encourage residents to call. We're kind of working out training for that now and trying to figure out what laws we have to deal with that. Our officers responded to it because they were blocking graduation traffic, and the kids kind of taunted them and filmed them because they weren't up on what laws we could use to deal with that. We may come back to council, we'll present it to Public Safety Committee. We may have to do something about riding motorized bikes on sidewalks in our city. But we'll see what we can do about that. But I do encourage residents, if they have problems with that, to give us a call, because we want to collect information on it and see how much of a problem it is here in the valley.
One note on the graduation, yes, and I agree that it went much smoother than last year, and thanks for the coordination. I did notice there was a lot more overflow parking, especially at the shopping center. There were some in the villas. I didn't really see if there was any on, the other streets in the Old Town, but you guys did put up cones, to show where there can't be parking. But I just noticed that because of the paid parking, I assume people, went to the shopping center primarily, and a lot of traffic was, foot traffic. It wasn't an issue, I don't think, but I'm not sure if there was any other complaints coming from Old Town residents or any other parts of the city if there were traffic issues or traffic issues.
Not this year.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
Anecdotally, they were parked pretty far down Reese, just for one, but besides that, it's been like really, really chill. I did see people parking right here though, which was kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, good on you. Nobody else was using it, so.
Councilmember Rosengart?
Before I forget, Public Works, I just drove Ernest Robles and I don't remember a crosswalk / slow traffic down item on Ernest Robles coming towards City Hall. Do we have one on this side?
The ones that's right here across the street?
No. You know how everybody complained when we did the right side of Ernest Robles, which is
Right.
going into the shopping center?
Uh-huh.
We have those.
Yeah, everything's in place now, both raised crosswalks on both
Both
sides of the
sides
road.
have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and.
I must have been going so slow, I didn't even
So
notice
the ones
it.
the ones on the east side seem lower because of the way the road's kind of, topography of the road. So it's not quite as noticeable on the east side of the highway versus the west side.
Did we make it lower or something?
It's not necessarily lower, it's just the way the road is tilted and stuff for flow. So it may kind of feel lower, I guess you would say. But
I'll pay attention.
it is there. They're both there.
They're both there. Okay, thank you.
The approach to that side is like 2 feet longer than the other side. That's for some reason. They're both within spec, but that's just the other side wound up being a little bit longer. And the signs that you're referring to, I believe they say raised crosswalk ahead.
That's it.
And I know they're on the side going towards Brody, but I'll have to verify that if they're coming from this side. Okay.
Both sides, because I don't remember it. Okay. If it didn't make an impact, it evidently is lower than the other side.
Any other questions for public safety? All right, let's move on to agenda item number 4, which is council consideration of agenda items for approval on consent. And before there's a motion, I do want to pull agenda item number 9 from consent. It would probably get pulled anyway, but just to make sure that we have time for both council discussion, but as well public comments on that item. So these would be considering on consent the remaining items, which would be 5, 6, 7, and 8, if anybody wants to make a motion. Councilmember Rosengart?
I move to approve on consent agenda item number 5, number 6, and number 7, and I wasn't going to include number 8.
You weren't going to include number 8, okay. Is there a second, or does anybody want to pull one of those items?
Second.
All those in favor of approving on consent, item number 5, 6, and 7, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we approved on consent item number 5, approval of the minutes from the May 20th, 2025 regular meeting. Item number 6, approval of an ordinance calling for the regular election of city council members in November 2025. That also, just for the public's notice, I think those open on July 19th is when the application window opens, and it'll close in August. The 19th through 18th? Okay. And then, okay. Yeah, and we'll make sure that information goes out. And then item number 7, approval of an ordinance calling for the special election of the street repair and maintenance tax in November of 2025. All right, so that will take us to item number 8, Consider an act on approval of an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. This would be budget amendment number 8 for the Countrywide Lane Waterline Project, and I'll hand this over for staff for further introduction.
Thank you. So in October of 2024, council approved a change order to include Countrywide Lane Waterline as part of the 2024-2025 combined capital improvement projects. At that time, the total construction cost was known to be $478.45. However, when we approved that and added that into the total project list for the 24-25 capital improvement plan, we didn't make a budget amendment at that time. Fast forward a little bit, when we did the Stearns Lanes water line, we went ahead and did the budget amendment at that time. So we've gone through and calculated what is needed, necessary to finish that project up. So there was a lot of cost savings that came from change order, but those were in street and general fund, and the Countrywide Water Lane project is a utility fund item. It is usually funded through the utility infrastructure fund. So construction cost was $478.45, and we have a little bit to finalize some of the engineering as we go toward the end of this project. It's about $17,000 left. And then we had a lot of fees that were unanticipated with the city of Austin. It was the $14,477.93 in there. That includes the fees for the meter and fees for their inspections. And those numbers were actually higher. They were going to be charging us some capital recovery fees on that, but we were able to, which was about $50,000 more. But we were able to talk to them and work out to not be having to pay any of those fees. So that brings the total project cost to $502,972.93. And so we would need a budget amendment of $153,648.93 to finish up this project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let's start with Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions on this. So originally we budgeted $349,000 for this.
Yes.
Did we have on all our other projects, we've been putting contingencies of 10 or 25%. Did we have that on this particular project or not?
No, we're not asking for a contingency at this point in time for this project.
Okay.
We think we should be within budget.
Of that additional $153,000, minus the $14,000 that we have to pay for Austin, because obviously that came up, is that in the remaining $139,000 or so? Does that include $17,000 for engineering?
Yes.
Or has that already been? Okay.
That's already been counted in those numbers.
So the final $120,000 plus, is that all additional construction costs?
That's for the finalized construction cost, yes.
Okay, and was that unexpected?
No, we should have done the budget amendment when we did the project, change order, versus like we did with the Stearns Lane project. I think when we were doing that, we thought overall in the project, overall in the 24-25, there's enough money to cover what is paid, but not from the utility fund.
Okay, so we could categorize this as an expected expense,
yes,
as opposed to, say, a cost overrun.
Right, no, it's not a cost overrun. It should have been an expected expense.
Okay.
And sorry to interject, just as a reminder, this 349, that was actually a carryover number
Yeah,
from a previous
so
fiscal
we
year,
didn't rebudget for when we had the numbers.
Fair enough.
So,
since this money is coming out of the utility fund, and it's been one of our concerns to, make sure that we are putting money into the utility fund for expenses that we expect, 10 years or so from now. Would this be an expected amount that we taken out of the utility fund for this year, or is it an amount that we should make up next year in our budget?
I think we can say this would be an expected amount that would be covered under what we were kind of planning in this. So I don't think we necessarily need to put in another $150K into the utility fund. Okay. I think we'll do another analysis of that as we look at infrastructure projects as we plan for projects this summer and double check that. But I think we can assume that this is an anticipated expense.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Rosengarten.
The job is already done, correct?
Most of the job is done. So that we haven't obviously installed the meter from Austin. So I would say the two ends of the project are not done. Everything in between is done. So the meter at the beginning of the line and the customer meters at the ends of the line are not completed yet. Those
And-
connections.
Okay?
Yeah.
And when this came up before, when we were doing the water line under Countrywide, and you said you're moving it away so that you don't, when you have to do any road work, you don't destroy the water line. So we're not undoing and doing something again.
No. Nothing being redone. Yeah, this is all part of the initial expense for the project.
Thank you. With that, I move to approve.
Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Burrell? That opens up for further discussion. Any other questions from council? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, we approved agenda item number 8. And let's move on to agenda item number 9, which is consider an act on selecting Freeland Turk as the city's engineering firm pursuant to RFQ number 04012025B. And I hand this over to staff for the additional details on this item.
So I'll go ahead and start us off. So in April, the city released a request for qualifications for engineering services. The city received an overwhelming number of responses. There were 15 responses. 14 of them were considered to be responsive to the request. Staff had gone through and we ranked all 14 of those, and we then took the top 6 responses and we gave those to the Public Works Committee and the City Council liaison to that committee. That's kind of what we did in the past when we, about 5 years ago, we had gone through and sent them out. 2 members of staff, the Public Works Committee liaison, and the Public Works Committee chair all served as the kind of scorers of the responses. And so we scored all six firms. And from those scores, Freeland Turk ranked 1 at 372 points. The Public Works Committee discussed the responses and the following, what came from the meeting. Chairman McAmel, who in the past was one of the scorers, ranked Freeland Turk first, Walter P. Morris second, and Garza's third. And the committee recommended these firms to be to council for consideration. That there were some differences among some of the committee members for who they would choose, but they recommended moving forward. However, based on the scoring, the recommendation from the Public Works Committee chair, staff has recommended that we select Freeland Turk as a city engineer and move forward to negotiating and executing a contract for their services. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Start with Councilmember Rosengarten.
Yes, I would like to speak with Freeland Turk.
Yeah, Tom Turk is here and he can answer some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, one of the things that we're always concerned about is how many engineers are on staff, how many times do we use engineering services, et cetera. Of course, we've got a lot of CIP projects that we're working on right now, so we need to utilize the engineers in order to help us on that. With that said, some people think there's only 2 people at your company. How many people are at your company?
We have 8 people. 4 of them are registered professional engineers. Myself, Gary Freeland, Melanie Norris, and Jacob McNew.
Do you feel with your company that you are qualified to represent a city of our size?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We specialize in smaller cities in providing engineering and general engineering services.
With the qualifications, the only thing we could look at is qualifications. We couldn't look at price per engineering firm. So at all the 14 different companies that everybody knows, all we could look at is qualifications of the companies. We could not look at what they charge per hour rate.
Correct.
I feel that you have been reasonable on your hour rate. Is there anything we can do to help lower the cost of engineering?
Actually, you're already doing it, and one of the examples is Dakota. Dakota takes care of a lot of the day-to-day coordination with the contractor, and he resolves a lot of issues in the field on a daily basis, and that saves us time and travel coming into Sunset Valley and dealing with issues. So we've been working as a team for the last 4 or 5 years now. We know how to work with each other, and your staff is very, very cost-minded, and we've settled into a really good partnership where we respect that, and we try to keep the costs low, and I think we all do a good job of doing that.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I want to make a couple comments on this, one of which was the process for this, which I felt was kind of abbreviated. My perception was, right or wrong, that it felt like the decision had been made beforehand, and we just went through this process as a pro forma thing. And it didn't feel good. And it didn't feel good that this ended up as a consent item for this agenda. My first year on council, I went and added up the engineering costs that we had, and it was over $250,000 for that year. And I brought this up and I said, I think these costs are high, and apparently I was the only one who felt that way. But I still kind of feel this way, and I went and I added up the costs from all of our agenda items for this year, which is not the full engineering costs, I know, and they're not accurate, but that came to $187,000. And I mentioned in council's meeting with Budget and Finance that I would really like to see a report that showed the cost for all of our vendors, not just engineering, but every other contractor and vendor that we use, so we can see what those costs are across the board, because right now they're just divided up in little places all over the budget, right? Because I think those costs are high. I think if the numbers that I've seen so far are right, this is for a 5-year contract, this is $1 million plus decision. And I don't think it should be rushed. I think we should have gone down to here's 3 final contenders or whatever, which is kind of what Public Works did. And then taking the time to go over them a little more carefully and say, what can they do for us? I've had some concerns about some of the things that have happened in the past few years, where projects have been done that really seemed unnecessary. And just as an example, for example, doing a study about whether we should do a roundabout on Brody Lane, which I think no one really asked for except for a couple of people, and I don't think came from council or much of anywhere else. And then a project to redo Home Depot Boulevard, which would have been a multi-million-dollar project. And thankfully, one of our citizens who's on Public Works is a leading expert on road construction and said, you don't need to do this. And that got that project canceled. But what would have happened if we didn't have that kind of expertise? We would have had this multi-million-dollar project that we didn't need to do. So I have some concerns, and I think this deserves more discussion and more of council looking into this. I may be the only one who feels this way, but I think it's at least worth talking about.
Councilor Rosengren?
Thank you, Council Member. What I can appreciate is concerns of spending too much money, because I also try and watch that we are value-driven. Looking at taxpayer dollars, we want to make sure that we are utilizing them in the best way possible. I do agree that Reimagine Brody Lane was probably pushed too fast, and we had to use the engineer to look at different aspects on Reimagine Brody Lane. But when we are being presented with projects that run off the tracks, basically, is what you can say. When Reimagine Brody started, and I've said this before, we started with basically talking about putting lighting on Brody Lane and ended up with redesigning the whole Brody Lane, which ended up with being a final estimated cost of $19 million, and then later we had to ask engineering to do some work, et cetera. So, and I agree also the roundabout on Brody Lane, that was total nonsense. I think there was 1 or 2 comments about doing that, and my engineer husband looked at it and said, that isn't even feasible. We don't even have the land in order to do it. So sometimes you can have residents who have the knowledge, and he's on Public Works, and so are 2 other engineers on Public Works that could help alleviate us doing some projects. So maybe we take some projects directly to Public Works that regard on engineering versus going to the engineer with these projects that are minor. That's all I have to say on that. But yeah, I'm always looking at trying to do value engineering whenever there's a project. Thanks.
Councilor Johnson?
You know, I think one of the important parts about the roundabout on Brody or the Home Depot Boulevard, they didn't happen. And, you know, so how many projects have we done that we shouldn't have done? I don't think there's any, right? So I don't know, just the fact that we didn't do certain projects that we were talking about, we talk about projects sometimes. And then, you know, if we built a roundabout on Brody, then that would have been silly, but like, I don't know what the problem is. You know, anyway, one moment, sorry. I think Freeland Truck has done, like, they seem to have scaled up. The question about how many engineers they have, to me, it's a business. So however many they had on staff, they scaled up. The projects went well. They didn't seem to, the cost of their engineering services didn't seem to be out of the ordinary to me, and at least the numbers that they presented to us, I think we all looked at each other and said, like, that seems to be in line. We did so many projects in the last, like, 4 years. I think we really need to appreciate that. I'm kind of at we said it in the last couple of meetings, I'm in the just take the foot off the gas kind of mode. And if that was a full-time staff member, I'm sure we would find something for them to do, but I don't know. I think it's nice that we were able to scale up and scale down. Maybe any of these other companies would be able to do it, but Freeland Turk was in the seat and they did it. And so, I don't know. Also, I was not aware of this. This was like bringing this even back was something that the Budget and Finance Committee said that we should do, just like send out the RFQ again, or RFQ?
It's in our financial policies.
Financial
Councilor.
policies.
Yeah, so
You have to.
we discussed it at the retreat. We kind of did an informal,
Yeah.
review, but we discussed that both the attorney and the engineering, those contracts were negotiated in 2020. So according to our financial policies, anything over 50,000, you have to release a
Yeah.
RFQ, so.
Which is fine. I think it's good that we're doing it. There's not a retainer, right? Or is there, like, how much, they're
So
just.
there's a general engineering, and the city has had this for a long time, there's a general engineering services contract for 30,000. A lot of that is for plan review, right? And so some of those costs are then recouped by applicants, right? So Gary Freeland with Freeland Turk reviews most of our watershed development permit applications. So,
Yeah.
which is anyone residential, commercial that's building in the city. So, and we're very fortunate. Gary Freeland happens to know our code very well, which is an asset. So.
That if we want to drag it out a little bit further, fine. If we want to vote on it tonight, fine. But
Just in response to Council Member Johnson, it's not that it was built already, it was that there was time wasted on design. And that shouldn't have even happened because it was not feasible to even do it.
yeah, he's writing something, so I'll just go. Yeah, actually, you're right. I didn't mean to say it the way I said it, but like, I feel like the councils that have been up here for a while have, I think, stopped a lot of. I heard a lot about certain members on other committees like spending a lot of time and money through committees, and I feel like the city has been a lot better with that over the past few years. Just a little bit more kind of having our finger on the pulse of the budget. So yeah, the way I said that was incorrect. So thank you for correcting me there.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Two things. One, I'm thrilled at all the stuff that we've gotten done in the last few years, especially when we had a long period before that where we didn't get anything done. I think Public Works, working with everyone, with the contractors and everyone else, has done a fantastic job. We've got all these things done. Then I would have thought it would take us another year or two to get as much done as we have. So that's wonderful. The point I was trying to make is that the money we spend on things that we don't want to do or don't need to do is money we can't spend on something else that we do want to do and do need to do. And it's great that we didn't do the Home Depot project, but we didn't do it because we had citizen expertise. Those citizens on that Public Works Committee, I'm sad to say, are getting older, and someday they're not gonna be here. And then where is the expertise in the city gonna come from to prevent us from doing things that we don't need to do? That's one of my big concerns right now.
Councilmember Burrell.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was, I think, perhaps maybe one of the only people that actually read all of the various proposals that, at least the top 6. And I think, you know, the top 3 that came from Public Works for consideration, I think were all very good. And it's difficult, they have strengths in different to evaluate. And there are a lot of considerations, I think, when in doing this selection process. My own, I guess, on the one hand, looking at the other potential bidders, it's tempting to think that issues that we have now will be solved if we choose them, and I think that's probably not guaranteed that would be the case. You know, in some cases, I would think, well, okay, we pick someone from Austin, you know, we'll get better service, but that's not necessarily guaranteed because it has to do with the time allocation of the engineering services. So anyway, there's a lot of unknown. There's, you know, I think my opinion is that regardless of which firm we choose, I don't think we'll go wrong. I don't think we'll be disappointed. Overall, when I consider everything that, you know, all the factors that go into again, I'm looking at just the bottom line of overall, okay, we have this discussion, we talk about it, you know, where are we gonna, you know, where's the best fit? You know, nobody's perfect, but I think that, at least from my perspective, I think Freeland Turk is the one that would be able to provide the best service for the city.
Councilmember Johnson.
So I don't know the relationship that Freeland Turk or any of these other engineering firms have with the other cities or groups that they work with, but so MEND came in while, you know, at the beginning of the meeting here, and I remember when we had the talk with them when they were going over plans, and it was one of those things where it's like, you need to start pushing back on us and the residents a little bit more, because like we say, hey, you know, shoot the moon, and then we see the price and we're like, oh, it's so expensive. And so it's just, you know, giving, again, with a relationship with other places, they might be just like, you just do what we tell you to do, and that's it. And, you know, Freeland Turk has been with us for a long time, but maybe knowing that civil engineers that live in the city are kind of maybe aging out, and just, if we don't have that, within our city, within the residents, then just say, you need to push back on anything we say. It's like if we say like, oh, we want to redo Home Depot Boulevard, like have a good reason not to do it. Are you saying that that project came from them? But, like, how did that one ever even come up?
I can answer that.
Sure.
So in December of 2022, council approved a task order that included improvements to the Home Depot meter vault, the improvements to the ERW Upper Cougar Creek Bridge, as well as improvements to ERW and Home Depot Boulevard for concrete pavement repairs, and that we move forward. So at some point that task order was also amended to include a shared use, some path along Home Depot Boulevard. We were looking at not just improving the north side, but possibly doing the south side. So the Public Works Committee spent at least 4 or 5 different meetings talking about Home Depot pavement repairs. So in February, they reviewed detour plans. They didn't want to do both at the same time, so not closing down Home Depot and ERW. In August, the trail work was considered to move to Home Depot Boulevard from Home Depot Boulevard to the Upper Cougar Creek project. In September of 2023, the Public Works Committee, discussed the reconfiguration of the entrance of Home Depot Boulevard onto the Brody Lane, and they wanted to make sure we move forward with the path. But then they also wanted to research options for the south side that were different from what we were looking at. Then we started discussing some of the changes and some of the improvements to the pavement itself. We were looking at PCMO for Home Depot Boulevard, which is kind of like, basically, I guess, a layer that goes on top of the concrete. Ironically enough, that is the meeting where they discussed the roundabouts, and their recommendation was to not spend a lot of time on design until more reasonable cost estimates and less disruptive options were available for the turn out of Lovegrass. In February of 2024, the Public Works Committee recommended holding off on Home Depot pavement improvements until Reimagine Brody moves forward. We did have a site visit in September of 23 with some of those, the committee members. We were all out there. We did kind of discuss maybe scaling back a little bit and not doing quite as much work. Not that it doesn't ever need to happen, but that we could do it at a different time. So whatever work was done on that project is still something that could be moved forward in the future.
Yeah, so all of that was like while I was on council, actually, and I do remember, and it felt like it kind of just went the way that projects go. We have an idea, we kind of go to the different committees, engineering looks at it, we spend time, and we decide against it. In fact, I remember the moment it died in my mind when you said, sorry, I know you're not supposed to, but when a council member said that is where, that stretch of road is where most of our money comes from, right there. So it's like, well, you cannot shut that road down at all costs. And it made a lot of sense because there was like a little bit of bad concrete towards that intersection. Like, we'll figure it out, but it's like, we can't redo that whole road. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what it was, and they basically said to hold off until we do the Reimagine Brody, and it would be more a part of that project if we ever did anything in the future with it.
Yeah, I don't think any of those projects that were like saved at the last second by like by one person kind of putting their hand up and saying this is a bad idea. I feel like all of those projects mentioned went the way the projects are supposed to go, and they died for very good reasons after a lot of people put their minds on them, so.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you?
I was the liaison for Public Works when this was all going on, and I was part of that site visit. And I have no problem with that whole process of what we went through. That all made good sense to me. But it was important that, a couple of the members of Public Works spoke up and said, we don't need to do this, not yet, not maybe for 5 or 10 years, regardless of Reimagine Brody or not, right? And the engineers were recommending that we did that. And that was a lot of money. It wasn't just the money we'd spent doing that, it's the money we would lose disrupting the business of our biggest sales tax revenue generator. And I had concerns about that because I didn't think it was a good recommendation. Now, nothing's going to be perfect, right? We're never going to have perfect consideration of everything we can do and cut away everything we can't do. Nobody's that good. Nobody's always going to make all the right decisions. But I wanted to bring it up because I thought it was important. If you all want to go ahead with this, you think this process has been good enough, that's fine with me. But I wanted to at least discuss it and not have it just going on consent.
Councilmember Menegas?
So when I think about the process for this, I think about pros and cons of large firms, small firms, medium firms, hiring an engineer on staff, all of those options I've heard us talk about over years. And so when I think about, like, if we hired an engineer on staff, we still wouldn't have a deep bench. We wouldn't have people with all the expertises that are involved in a firm. So some of these firms do have deep benches that are in Austin, like Moore and Garza. They have people on staff that have all of that expertise. Freeland Turk has not quite as deep a bench from what I read, but they subcontract for those specific qualifications. And if we had an engineer on staff, we'd have to do that too. Mm-hmm. So when I'm weighing all of that, and thinking about all of the projects that I am so glad we are finally moving forward with and have gotten done, and I think Public Works has done a great job. And, you know, I'm not an expert on engineering fees, but I think when you weigh all of the pieces, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't know if you go with a company that has a deep bench, if it's gonna cost more money because they have to support all those people, rather than subcontract where you're just hiring somebody for a specific task. So those are just some thoughts I have.
So before opening up for public comments, oh, go ahead, Councilmember Rosengart.
If you want to do public comments, I'll wait.
Okay. I did want to state just the reason it was on consent, it was my decision. I don't want anybody deflecting that to staff. The reason I did that was because there was consensus among all the reviewers that Freeland Turk was the #1 choice. And so I should have, never put this on consent just in retrospect, because I think it is worth the discussion, and I was pretty sure it's gonna get pulled anyway, but that was my decision, so make sure that, staff is not being blamed for that. But it was a clear consensus among the 5 reviewers. I'm also okay if council wants to weigh this further. There's not a critical need for us to decide tonight. If there's additional discussion or research that council feels they need to have before making a decision, because we still are going to be moving forward with the budget process. We need an engineer. By the time we get through the next, the start of the fiscal year, if we don't have a decision by then, we're probably going to be, going forward with Freeland Turk for like an as-needed basis anyways. So I want to make sure council is comfortable with this. The reason I was comfortable with it, because I trust, the reviewers and the fact that there was not anybody who decided against Freeland Turk. So I do think, though, the points about how do we make sure that we have a check when we have outside contractors providing guidance and advice, and of course we're trusting them, to a certain extent, to be providing good advice to us. And I think that my experience with Freeland Turk is that they are a good partner for us. However, when we bring up examples of saying, well, should we even do this project? That in-house expertise to really say, where does this project really need to get done, the timing, the things like that. Staff has some expertise. We have a great committee that has expertise as well. The point made about, what happens when we start losing some of that expertise over time. Does that belong in a staff position that we try to beef up? Does that really focus on, having like maybe even another value engineering outside firm to do some high-level assessments? I think that's a decision that we can also bring back and discuss if there's a need for that, because I do worry about losing that expertise that we can rely on. Some of this, though, starts with our 30-year plan of replacement and renewals, right? Just kind of looking at that roadmap of utility projects and public works projects. Probably one of the reasons why that Home Depot one came up was because it was, on a schedule, right? And Public Works looks at that routinely, and I think that please make sure that you're giving me the, the direction, just so that staff doesn't feel that pressure. That being said, what if council makes a decision tonight? I feel comfortable with Freeland Turk. If you need more time, there is more time. We'd bring this back at our July 15th meeting. So with that, I'm going to open it up for public comments at this time.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I'm both on finance, chair of finance, and on public works for, I don't know, a long time, more than I can remember. We are losing public works. I don't know how much longer I'll be there. I know one person's leaving. We have an expertise impending crisis on public works. I asked for other engineers because I always try to leave and find somebody to replace, and there aren't people of the caliber that we have now waiting in the wings. So that's one of the reasons that I suggest that we get a staff engineer. It's easily paid for from some savings that we could do, I think. I think it's certainly in the viable range. We used to have a guy, was his name Greg, Carolyn? Was that the person that we used to have?
Yes, there was Greg was an engineer that we worked with who was mostly doing basically kind of construction management. That's all he was doing, was the projects had already been engineered and stuff.
And it was nice to have a check, where you have a different opinion from a different firm saying, hey, and it also kind of kept the roads making sure that everything's, and so I lament, and I have lamented for a long time, the loss of Greg, or a Greg, you know, just for checks. So I think that's an important thing. I think when you look at the in-house needs, when you look at 30, 30, and 50, if you're going to insist on doing a CIP, which I still object to, but if you're going to insist on doing that, you're already at $110,000. You're going to still have other costs for different expertises that you're still going to want to have a little bit of that 30K towards. So, you know, it's not a total wash, but you're almost to a full-time, and that's when you don't talk about things like paying $75,000 for a sidewalk, you know, engineering. There are places I think the numbers have been excessive. I mean, that's it. I would love to take a deep dive. I was never allowed to get the data when I was on council. I was waiting to get it now that I'm on finance. I do think that there's some analysis that would help us, you know, to just say, well, this is how much we spend, these are the percentages. And it's nice to get a presentation from your people who are the people, but it's, you know, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. They tell the story they want to tell. I mean, you know, that's the way things are. And so I would just like to look at it because I'd like to see the backup data to those numbers. Not an unreasonable thing, just to look at the analysis. You know, it seems like it's around 20%, which is the top end of what things should be, sort of, you know, but if it's always 20%, it's always full, as opposed to a slide. Well, this is data worth having. You know, I think it's worth looking at our numbers. You know, I'm not a numbers geek, but I am a policy sort of person, and I like to know what the overall look of everything is. And I don't think we've done that. You know, I think we're just starting to do that, to look at our contractors and that. So if it's not a rush, I think it helps you make your decisions. And 5 years is a long time, and it's 5 years at a pivotal time, you know, when we're losing in-house expertise. And so, you know, I like flexibility, so I don't know that we want to tie ourselves to a 5-year contract, if that's what we're talking about doing. You know, I think, you know, we used to do a yearly contract, and then you review at 5 years to see whether or not you was mandated to say, is this a reasonable thing? So I don't think I would like to see us do a 5-year contract. I think I'd like to see us do a year contract. And I'd also like to look at whether or not we need to get more in-house expertise, and if that would save us money. I may not, I don't know. I mean, I have some ideas about it, but I think it's a time to reflect before we jump, you know, just because it's an opportunity. So I agree that nothing bad is going to happen if we get any of the 3 people. I was the motion maker. I don't really like, those were not approved minutes, and I would have made a correction to those minutes because it looks like an endorsement more than I would have made it. Look, if you do a fast read, Freeland Turk is fine. You know, I have my problems with them, but they're fine. The world's not going to end if we keep them. But they don't have dedicated engineers. Like the people we had before, you had a water person. And when I came here to city council, I got an education from the water person about the way those pipes. I haven't learned anything engineering-wise the way that I did in the last 5 years. That's part of my bias, you know, is that I'm not seeing that specificity. You know, I'm seeing the drop where we've had this problem on Pillow where we had that and there wasn't the follow-up because I don't think they have a dedicated water person there to say what's wrong with the Pisamish. And I think that matters to our city. That's why I was in favor of a local firm and one with deeper benches with specific area people. You know, that you had, you know, a lighting person. I had an engineering firm behind me, and they had each of their people for each of their areas. And I have not seen that kind of depth. I'm sorry if I'm over time. I haven't seen that kind of depth in road work either. Like where they did the roundabouts, there are different kinds of roundabouts that were, you know, they're doing 2 legs. I've seen a lot of specific things I could say that I have problems with. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else wishes to speak?
Hi, Helen Bessie, 795 Oakdale. I wasn't going to speak on this at all, but I do agree with Melissa. I think a 1-year contract is very reasonable. because things change constantly in Sunset Valley. You have no idea what you're going to be facing. So a one-year contract. And I also think if somebody on staff, if you had the expertise of someone on staff who could oversee what's happening, that has a better sense of what's going on with the city. Now, I don't know if that would cost you more or not, but one-year contract with someone who has the expertise in-house to make sure that they were doing things properly and everything was not that anybody would do anything improperly, I don't mean that, sorry. Just to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our bucks. Thank you.
And I think this is accurate, but we, as part of what we do with our engineering contracts, is that annually we assign a task order for the general engineering. And so that is something that is not a 5-year contract. It's an annual engineering service. And then we do a task order based, a work order essentially, for each of the work orders. So I think, this is in line with the financial policy, is that we are reviewing the engineering firm. We have a go-to engineering firm that we have. It doesn't prevent us from, I don't think there's an overall contract that would prevent us from reevaluating that before the 5 years. We're not, I don't believe that that's the case, but I want to verify with staff if that's something that council has a concern about, whether that would be an obstacle if we, as structured right now with the current RFP, or RFQ, sorry. And we can, Councilor Medicus.
So I remember when the financial policy was discussed about, that's I think where the 5 years is coming from, that we go out for bid every 5 years. But I don't think, because we've had other contracts that we rebid that were annual, and they were just reviewed annually. So I don't think, unless it's in their contract for 5 years, but the 5-year thing was the review and the financial policy from what I remember.
and obviously a longer contract means that you can probably guarantee you better rates, right? Because you can lock in those rates, and that's something that council could consider as well as part of this evaluation. Councilor Rosengart.
Carolyn, and I know that Matt wanted to speak. Did you want to speak first?
Just an update. So I'm looking over our agreement here, and I think it was sort of an evergreen. So of course there's a termination clause. The client or engineer may terminate this agreement without cause at any time prior to the completion of services. So there is a termination clause, but it looks like the original agreement from back in 2020. I'm not seeing where there's a 5-year term. But Mayor, you are correct. We have task orders every year, and the engineers provide rates annually. So.
Yeah, please go ahead if you want to address that question.
Specifically on the contract, it does not have an end date, but you can terminate it anytime you like. There's a termination for convenience clause in just about every engineering contract. Our rates are renewable every year. That doesn't mean we change them every year, but they are up for discussion. I believe during the term of this contract, we probably changed the rates 2, possibly 3 times, mainly because of inflation. It was a very unusual inflationary period. The discussion here has been very good for me. I'm taking notes. It's always very beneficial to us to hear your thoughts, your concerns, and what you believe is going on. And it's always different from what we are doing with the staff on a day-to-day basis. So it's just always interesting to understand the difference. And this happens in every city that we serve. We're just in the trenches every day. We're dealing with daily problems, and you're dealing it at 30,000 feet. But anyway, the feedback is has been wonderful. I want to talk about just a couple of items that came up during the discussion to give you an example of how we're different. And I want to talk about the roundabouts. As I remember things, there were a couple of public meetings regarding Brody, and we received input from people at that meetings, hey, can we consider roundabouts on Brody? And it wasn't just one person, there was multiple comments. So when we got together and talked about what we're going to attempt to address and what we're not going to do, we talked about the roundabouts. And as I recall, when we talked to the staff, we were all in agreement that at the end of the day, they just weren't going to be feasible. They weren't really a good idea. They're just very difficult to build in a retrofit situation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the end of things. It's important to give people who make comments feedback. You know, we received your comment, we understood it, we looked at it, this is what we came up with, and this is why we feel the way we do. So what we agreed was that I would go back to the office and I would spend a few hours just coming up with some very basic sketches on what they would look like. And if I recall, there was 3 locations, ERW, Home Depot Boulevard, and what's the next street? Yes, thank you. So that's exactly what we did. And I provided very rough sketches, almost hand-drawn on a CAD machine. I know because I did it. And I think I spent maybe 2 or 3 hours doing that. So that probably equates to $600, $800. And I think that's a level of effort, a minimum level of effort to respond to the public on an idea that was interesting but probably wasn't going to work. I think other firms would have taken that effort to a much higher level and spent a lot more money. We knew it was not a good idea, and we did the minimal effort to respond to that comment. So just to give you an idea of how we view things and how other firms might view things. We work for a lot of small cities. They're all budget challenged. They're all cost-minded. So we have to get to the answer as fast and as cheapest as possible, and I think we do that better than most. On Home Depot Boulevard, the scope of the project was just as Carolyn described it. It started out as one thing, and it grew here and it grew there, and it developed. Not unusual, happens all the time. But what I heard, not only with Carolyn's comments, but here on the dais, was a very collaborative process. You did not have an engineer that crossed his arms and said, this is the way we're going to do it, and that's it. No siree. We took in comments, we took time to understand, your goals, your objectives, what you wanted to accomplish, and we brought drawings, we brought alternatives, we brought solutions. We shared them with staff, we shared with the Public Works Committee. We got feedback, we changed, we molded, there was a collaborative process that went back and forth, and it resulted in some very wise decisions, I think. Hey, let's hold off and do all this when we do Brody in that area. It made all the sense in the world to me. Okay, but when we started that project, Reimagine Brody wasn't even a topic yet. So the things that we wanted to do to that intersection weren't even thought of. And so the other thing I want to clarify is you mentioned redoing Home Depot Boulevard. The scope was to rehabilitate the pavement, which was basically fixing cracks and fixing the joints. We were never going to redo Home Depot Boulevard from one end to the other. There was a significant change, though, in that the intersection is geometrically insufficient. We have a lot of large trucks that are going in and out of Home Depot Boulevard. And the rear tires are running up on the curbs. The sidewalks are cracking and falling apart. You have pedestrians, so there's a safety issue. And we felt like it was important that, you know, we take the opportunity that if we're going to do something here, we might as well get that done now. The Public Works Committee felt that it could wait. I understand that. Fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But it's, you know, it's our responsibility to bring these things to you, things that aren't working as they should. Here's the fix. Here's how much it costs. Here's the impacts. We talked about traffic and what impact it would have on Home Depot and all the traffic control, what have you, and you decided it needed to wait. A collaborative process worked again. So I just wanted to point those things out. I also want to point out that you know, we have a great working relationship with this city. We've done some very good things for you. It's kind of neat to see the fruits of your labor come to fruition, to see the things that you design. And I'm very proud of the work that we've done here. And I'm very proud of the work that we have done as a team. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
I'm going to move that we act on selecting Freeland Turk as the city's engineering firm pursuant to RFQ number 04012025B. Should I put the second part about? Add that? And have the mayor negotiate and execute a contract for engineering services. Is that good? Yep.
All right, there's a motion to select Freeland Turk as the city's engineering firm pursuant to the RFQ, as well as proceeding with the mayor to negotiate a contract. Is there a second for that motion?
A second.
Councilmember Burrell, that seconds. That'll open up for further discussion. Councilor Rosengarten?
Carolyn, earlier I was going to ask you, I know that you ran numbers on what our engineering costs have been over the last number of years.
I have.
It was, yeah. And because of that, you have shown us that they haven't been unreasonable in the last 5 years.
No, and actually, strangely enough, if you adjust for inflation, like it's definitely there. I can give you, let me pull it up real quick. So I just recently did 2023 and 2024, because then when I did that report, it ended in 2022. Now 2023, we were doing a lot of projects. Engineering costs were higher than average in those years. Oh, hey, yeah, there's the graph I made. The orange lines is basically if you adjust for inflation from those years to today, and then the blue lines represent the actual cost. So 2023, yes, we had high costs. It was above average. Average costs generally over the past, basically from 2007 to 2024, was $253,144. So last year we were only up about less than 7% than we were, you know, above average. In 2022 we were actually less. So it just depends on the years and what we're doing. But I would say that no engineering costs, especially once you start adjusting for inflation, and the number of projects we are doing, they are not out of you know, characteristic that we would expect.
Matt, can someone point to the graph? Where is 2017, 2018, and 2019? Because it's too far away from my eyes.
2017 is going to be the large orange line in the middle.
Okay, that's when we were planning the new buildings, the new police
Yes.
building, the new public works building. So it's right in the middle, 2017, right there.
Yeah.
Engineering. Okay, and then what was happening in 2007?
2007 was a year there were a bunch of projects that were happening throughout the city. So that was the year that I would say, comparable to what we're doing now, was probably the most projects that were happening around that time.
And that was Gray Engineering.
I would say they weren't them at that point. They were somebody else. Yeah, SB. Yeah.
SB.
So yeah, and so yeah, that's where you can see the biggest jump and what those costs would have been
in today's dollars.
Okay, so thank you for pulling that up.
Thank you.
Further discussion from council? All right, so there is a motion that we're going to proceed with a vote on, and the motion is to select Freeland Turk as the city's engineering firm pursuant to the RFQ and authorize the mayor to negotiate and execute a contract which will be part of our engineering services for this upcoming year. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, the motion passes. And I do appreciate council's discussion and the feedback we've gotten from the residents. I also want to thank the engineering firm, Freeland Turk. Like I said, I've had a great relationship with you. I think you work well with staff, so I think it's a good selection for us to move forward with. But I do appreciate the understanding that we have to always have in mind what checks we have as a city to make sure that we are following the best interests, the best financial interests for the city as well. Council, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is presentation, agenda number 10, which is a presentation and possible action on the purchase of monument signs and approval of an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. And I'll hand that over to staff for introduction to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to introduce this item. We're actually not going to consider an ordinance. Originally, we thought about bringing an ordinance amendment, so my apologies for that's how the agenda language was posted. But this really is just a presentation and possible action or possible staff direction. So I just wanted to give some background on the monument signs, just as a reminder. We've been talking about these for a few years now. These are to replace what we've colloquially call the tombstones. So there are two on Brody Lane at either end of the city, the entrances or exits to the city on Brody Lane. And then there's a third one on ERW in the median just before you hit the frontage road. So just these are the three monument signs that we have been discussing replacing. So all the way back in 2022 when we had a contract with Canales and Company coming out of our rebranding, so kind of post-rebranding, Canales and Co. worked on several monument sign designs. And I know some of the committees, including CED and the Arts Commission, talked about some of the designs and gave feedback. And so this project has been in the works for quite a while. So in addition to, we had some leftover federal funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, so the money that cities received as part of the COVID relief from the federal government. We used the bulk of that to do our small business grant program, and so the leftover funds we decided to allocate to beautification and placemaking, because that was a recommendation from Ampersand, who worked with us on the rebranding. So just last year, in the last fiscal year, we used those funds, about 8,000 of it, to pay for the mosaic that's at Jones and Westgate that updated. It used the same sign, but it updated the facade. So the plan was to take the remaining money. We carried it over from fiscal year 24. It's about $32,000, and looking at implementing those monument signs that were designed by Canales and Company. So Carolyn reached out to Art Scene Alliance. I'll just go ahead and hand it over to Carolyn to talk about. I just wanted to give some background about what brought us here. So.
Yes, we reached out to Art Scene Alliance, who partners with the city on Art Fest, and kind of asked them to see if they could help make these monument signs a reality. So they have been able to design the signs. They are going to have the new colorful logo. On one side, it would say, "Welcome to Sunset Valley." On the opposite side, it would say, "Thanks for visiting Sunset Valley." And the other thing is that we also put in for them to be lit so they could be seen at night. And it is using the reverse channel lighting, which is part of the city's code to have that style of lighting. Other types of lighting are not allowed on signs, so that is the kind of lighting that would be on that. And you can see they have like an illumination. It does that halo effect, which is the same kind of lighting that we see on the signs for the majority of the businesses in Sunset Valley as well. We did get a quote for 3, but staff is recommending just the 2 on Brody at this time to start there, and we did get the quote back from them on just the 2, and that's I think it's $49,268 for those 2 signs. So yeah, we'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has about these, and
And one more comment. So yeah, again, so the quote for the two signs. So if we just, staff's recommendation would be just to replace for now the monument signs on Brody, because those really are the major entrances and exits to the city, and the dual sign would serve its purpose. Welcome to Sunset Valley. Thank you for visiting. It comes just under what would be required by the state for us to go out for competitive bidding. However, if we wanted to proceed with Art Scene Alliance, our financial policies, which again are not law, but they are our city, financial policies and guidelines, do mention that any purchase of $25K to $49,999 requires five quotes. We only have the one quote, but Art Scene Alliance did, they did not charge us, right, for doing this mock-up. Other companies may charge a fee in order to, do a mock-up like this. But we really wanted to bring this to you to get your feedback. It would require, right, if we do purchase 2, it would require a budget amendment. So we only have $32K left in the monument sign funds. That's the leftover federal funds that we received from the American Rescue Plan. And then my recommendation would be, if council wants to proceed with the monument signs, that we use the hot funds for the remaining balance, because it is promoting the city. So.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, council, the funds, the 32,000 is restricted funds. We have to use it for certain purposes. So one of the purposes we identified early on was branding or monument signs for the city. So this is in line with that. We would have to go out and get additional quotes if we decide to proceed, since it falls within a financial. I guess we could override that, but
council could override that.
But it might be best policy for us to go and just determine if there's a cheaper, way to build and construct design if we want to move forward with this design. With that, Councilmember Johnson.
The first thing on the top of my mind, they just look like bigger tombstones. I mean, there's not much you can do like with them, and I get that.
Yeah, they would be great. It would just be replaced, right?
the ones that are out there?
I'm sorry.
What was the question?
Yeah, because the comment was they still look like tombstones.
I think there's, given the space that we have, especially at the 290 end of Brody, it's a very narrow space. There are limited kind of signs that we can do. We've looked at some other options. That is the design that was based out of what was approved by the Canales and Company, kind of when they did all the entryways and stuff like that. It was based on that. If there's something else you want us to consider, we can definitely look at that.
Yeah, I try not to let just like personal taste, lead in the. For some reason, I don't. For some reason, I do not like them, but I'm not gonna. If everyone else wants to go along with them, where is the solar panel gonna go?
It would go.
It's on the ground, but it looks
it's down. It would go basically down away from the sign. So on the one at 290, it would be heading south toward William Cannon, and on the one that's closer to Oakdale, it would be heading north toward 290.
But how far away?
At least probably about 50 feet.
50 feet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, that was it. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I want to say what we have now looks like tombstones. And I think these are a big, big improvement. And I think it's another nice element to branding our city, along with friends of mine who don't live in Austin. When they drive by, they always comment on the utility boxes, because the utility boxes just really jump out and look good at you. And I see people doing this all over, and ours look better than anybody else's, I think. And I think this is another nice element that brands the city, brings in that sense of place. I think it's money well spent to do this.
Councilmember Rosengart.
My feeling is, we've gone so many years without lighting on our signage, and just like I never noticed there wasn't lighting on Brody Lane when it's dark, and the reason I never noticed there weren't lights on Brody Lane when it's dark is because my headlights are on, and I can see perfectly fine. Same thing. So with this sign, I can see it perfectly fine at night because my headlights are on. So during the daytime, you can see it perfectly fine without lights. So I'd love to find out what something like this would cost in a stone instead of aluminum cabinet with backlit lighting. And what could we get for a dollar amount of $32,000 and under? Because we learned our lesson on Reimagine Brody where we said, whatever you want, and then we found out about the dollar. So let's try and work from the dollar and go backwards.
Councilor Johnson.
And I know this group kind of just did the design, and it's you know, it's a jumping off for us to start talking about it. I really actually do like what they did on the one at Jones, and I don't know if this was like a mosaic, then hey, no light, and I don't even know how much that cost. I know I can find it out, but I feel like
The mosaic, that was a different, that was an artist that we.
oh, I know,
worked with, yeah.
but you know, just you know, this is $50,000. I thought I saw 66.
66 would be for
Three.
all three.
All three. Okay. So, yeah. It's a good jumping off for me, but I'd be willing to see what else we can do there.
Councilor Rosinger.
Another comment. One time, a car came off the road, hit the median, hit our sign. So if this is aluminum, it's going to be destroyed. If it's rock, I know, we got a car accident.
Councilor Medicus.
So, I'm not sure we could do the colors with stone, but I like the design. This design was presented, I don't know how many years ago now with Canal. As far as it being on Brody, I think it's important to create that sense of place. And this design did go through Arts Commission, it went through CED, and I'm not sure if it went through P&E, but if you want to like go get other designs, we have $32,000 in the rescue funds. We said we'd use those for signs when we first got that funding, and if the total's 49, then the rest of that comes out of hot funds. No, I'm fine with it. I like the lighting.
Councilor Johnson.
I was trying to find if it went through committees, and I didn't see that. And so if y'all have looked at it, then again, go for it. I don't want to be. It was
a couple years ago, so.
Oh, like these? Like
This design was
2022.
voted on, what, 2-3 years ago?
2022.
2022, so old history.
Make a motion.
Councilor Rosengarten and then Mayor Pro Tem.
I've heard numbers lower than 66,000. What I'm seeing is 66,000.
Yes,
438.
Councilmember. So this was provided to us, I believe, today, and this is for two, because we asked what would it cost for two, because given that the three was going to be quite expensive, and also trigger, you know, bidding requirements. So the cost for two signs is the two signs as designed with the lighting and the dual sides, the solar lighting, would be $49,268. And I can do the math of what we need to pull from the hot funds real quick.
Personally, I still would not like to just approve it. This is the first time we've seen this with backlit lighting, et cetera. It's not the first time we talked about monument signs, but I am very interested in what would it be to get stone signage with that color on it, and it can be done. I've seen it.
If council directs us, we could reach out to some other companies and, you know, come back with some other options.
How much do companies charge to do a bid or drawing?
I mean, thankfully, Arts Scene Alliance did not charge us, right, for these
Yep.
for these mock-ups. Other companies, you know, may. We've seen that before where they've, you know, asked,
Yeah,
charged
I'm
us
not
for
sure.
the design, for the mock-ups. So just so if we went with the two, as is, we would need a budget amendment drawing from the hot fund balance of $18,018. So that would need to make up the difference of what we have left in the ARPA funds.
Which is like another option, same design, just another option, another material option.
Councilor Medicus? Oh, sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, you had
Oh,
your.
sorry. Oh, there was another design that I think came out of Reimagine Brody. There were some signs designed that were
I can bring those up. Let me see if I can find them.
longer and skinnier, so that might address the tombstone. Yeah, it was the sign.
Let me
Yeah.
also just pull
Yeah,
up the
that's what I
Canales, just so we have that. There was another design that the committees also liked that had mosaic, but, you know, I think mosaic design would have been harder to implement with this sign. Where is it here? Boundary markers. So
Does
this,
Men Collaborative have a copy of that design we talked about on Reimagine Brody?
There, there's the
so this is
original.
from the Canales.
Okay. There,
What's this?
there.
I can give you one that's from that too.
And again, these were stucco ceramic mosaic logo typed, carved into stone and painted.
So, I would just, although I like the mosaic that we did at Jones Road, I think on Brody, I would like to see something crisper, with the name Sunset Valley very distinguished, because they kind of lost the Y in Valley on the mosaic. So I think this is our shopping corridor. It needs to be very crisp and very clear, very professional. That tall skinny one is cool too.
Yeah, I like that one.
I'm sorry?
It's just how do you do the other one with welcome to Sunset Valley, or thank you for shopping or coming to?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, unfortunately,
little tiny letters at the bottom.
unfortunately, the rocks at the bottom sort of emphasize that graveyard sort of look and feel, but.
So these were some, is this from these were some designs we got from FSG, who did our street sign rebranding.
And none of those are lit.
In this design, they aren't lit.
They aren't or
They
are?
are not lit. So that's a kind of tall version of the sign, tall skinny version.
I don't like how the letters are this way.
Oh, they
I
put it
have
on.
like a,
Councilmember Johnson.
this is a tangential question. How do you find stuff so fast? I'm looking on the website, I'm looking through Laserfish, I can't find anything, and then here's just like designs from wherever.
Yeah,
Is this
the
just in
files.
your
In the
shared drive or
files.
whatever?
Shared drive.
Just open that up to public.
No thanks.
Right. And they're the welcome to and the thanks for coming are down the side.
Yeah.
I don't like the black typeface, but.
I'm gonna go ahead and open up for members of the public to provide feedback too at this time.
Thank you. This has been a fun conversation to listen to. First of all, actually, I agree with Rudy. I like the stone, but I didn't. I'm here because I just want to remind you that those tombstones were designed and made by Kat Quintanilla many, many years ago. And I think when you take them down, you should at least offer them to her or put them in someplace respectfully here, because she donated those to us when we had no money. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Or we could use them at other locations. Ernest Robley's coming in off of 290 and
Well, we don't want them, I think it's a good idea to, yes, either donate them to who donated them to us or to find another home for them, but you don't want them very prominent because it has the old logo. And so one of the whole,
got it.
when we spent the money we spent to rebrand the city, you want to make sure that
Everything.
all of our public-facing logos have the new logo. In fact, speaking of, we need to update the one up there.
Yeah.
Nobody notices.
That stays, that stays.
Historical, right?
Let's keep public comments and then we'll come back to council discussion. So there are other members of the public that wish to speak to this agenda item, please feel free to step over to the podium. Okay.
Burton Pearson, 39 Pillow Road. I'm a member of the Planning and Environmental Committee, and I am the vice chair of that committee. I just wanted to say quickly, I certainly believe it's better environmentally if the signs are not lit. Thank you.
Signs are not lit.
Yeah.
Councilor Medicus, you had a comment?
Oh, just had a suggestion. Just had a suggestion for the old ones when they get changed out, is perhaps we could put those old ones on the trails. And I'd be happy to check with Kat to see if that would be agreeable.
So Council, it doesn't sound like we have consensus on moving forward exactly with this design. If we bring this back, at least having an option for lower cost, non-lit material or design would be helpful. Potentially reaching out to some other firms to see if we can get quotes without having to pay a fee for some of either this design or something that's lower cost. There's also maybe some interest in looking at some of the alternative designs that were already looked at, but I'm not sure like how council would like to proceed with that if they want, for example, the Arts Commission to reevaluate those now that we have 3 years of perspective on the design, or not. If there's a preference for that, certainly we can also have that go through another recommendation process if that would be council's desire too. At the minimum, we can bring this back certainly the next meeting with some additional cost estimates based on some of the feedback. Does council feel strongly that this design, at least getting another cost estimate, is the appropriate next step, or do you want to have all the designs re-looked at by one of the committees or have some input process on that? Councilmember Rosengart, well, let's do Councilmember Burrell since you haven't.
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't heard anyone say yet that signage is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So I think that whatever we do, I think we should push forward. Also, I would, to the degree that it's feasible, I've heard this chorus sung many times in the last year or two, that that if some indication of the sort of the cost level could be provided, so that we're not all spinning our wheels on this, we don't come back with a signed quote that's going to be $300,000. I think that would be helpful for the council as well.
Councilor Rosengart.
I was basically going to say the same thing, is basically limit the dollar amount and then work backwards from there. And we already have all these designs that have been presented before, and we all liked them. So let's just work with the designs we already have.
All right, so we're not going to take a formal action on this. We're just going to get direction and work with staff to bring back this item for a future meeting and present some additional options for council consideration. Councilor Medicus?
I just want us to look at both the lower model and the vertical. Yeah, maybe compare those two.
All right, any other questions on this item before we move on to our next agenda item? All right. Moving on to agenda item number 11, presentation and possible action on amendments to Chapter 31 relating to standing committees and creation of a community engagement team. So council, one note is that item 12 is contingent on how we decide to, if we move forward with the language for the community engagement team, if that language is altered from the staff recommendation, then we might need to proceed with item 12. If we keep it as recommended, then item 12 is no longer needed, since council won't be doing the direct appointments. But this is bringing back the item that we've discussed now at several council meetings, going back all the way to our retreat this year, or last year, as well as retreats in prior year. And I'll leave it to staff for an update on where this is right now as far as the changes that have happened since the last, that staff and I are proposing, that have happened since our last discussion, as well as the meetings that have happened with the committees that are at least CED that have been since our last council meeting as well.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, council, we have discussed this several times now, and it's a discussion that began many years ago in 2021 at that committee and council summit. So just as a reminder, well, actually as an update, so the CED, the last time we discussed this with you, with council, was on May 20th, and we had some draft language. The CED committee met on May 21st, and they formally recommended transitioning to a community engagement team, and they expressed support for a more collaborative and informal structure. Fortunately, all of the active members of CED want to be a part of the team, so I'm very grateful to them that they want to continue and work on and help organize and execute city events. And just as a reminder, so back in the P&E committee discussed this in April, and then I'll just read the motion. So, excuse me, they discussed it in March. I actually went to the committee and presented, and then in April, when they met, the committee motioned to recommend the committee name change to Parks and Environmental and the purpose statement listed below. The Parks and Environmental Committee makes recommendations to the City Council regarding environmental issues and programs and the planning, development, and management of the city's public parks, green spaces, and conservation lands. This includes vegetation, restoration, wildlife trails, and recommendations to council for green space acquisitions to expand and refine the trail links and neighborhood buffers. And all of the committee members that were in attendance voted in favor of that name change. Additionally, we've discussed that with the name change and it wasn't much of a change actually to the purpose statement of the planning environmental. It's just codifying that will now be Parks and Environmental. The proposal that we discussed with zoning at May 7th would be changing it to a Planning and Zoning Commission. Of course, we're not taking action on that this evening because that requires amending the Land Development Code, which requires notice and public hearing. And so the recommendation there would be if the changes as presented this evening with Chapter 31 go through, then staff is recommending that council directs staff to bring back a resolution at the next meeting to then initiate the public hearing process and taking the formal establishment of a Planning and Zoning Commission, which would require public hearings with the Zoning Commission and ultimately City Council. So the changes outlined in the ordinance, and my apologies, it wasn't included in the backup, but you all should have a copy now. So it changes the Planning and Environmental Committee to the Parks and Environmental Committee. It removes the CED committee from the list of standing committees, so CED would be dissolved. It updates and codifies purpose statements for the 4 remaining standing committees: Public Safety, Budget and Finance, Public Works, and Parks and Environmental. And then it adds a new section, 31.40, which creates and establishes the Community Engagement Team. And really the major change from the last time that we talked about this on May 20th is membership and appointments. So the previous presentation draft language included team appointments by City Council. However, upon further review and discussion with staff and in discussing with the mayor, we propose a new process where volunteers are appointed by the Communications and Events Coordinator under the supervision of the city administrator, and appointments may be made at any time with no set term limits, and members serve until they step down or are no longer able to participate. Again, really delineating that this is not a committee, that this is a working group, and it's welcome to all. The minimum requirement is to have at least one member on from the Arts Commission be a member of the team, and at least one member of the Parks and Environmental Committee be a member of the team, just so that there is coordination, because those two bodies plan events. And again, the ultimate purpose of this team is to collaborate and coordinate and create a draft calendar so that everybody that's involved in planning events, city-sponsored events, know when those events are happening, what is logistically required, so we don't run into all of our events happening in April, for example. So we have a good space, so we're using our resources wisely. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. But yes, as the mayor said, we have agenda item 12 in case we want to move forward with creating the team, but you want to revert to council appointments. We have agenda item number 12 available in case council wishes to proceed.
I'll just give my thoughts on why I agree or work with staff on the proposed changes. One is the timing. This is something that this committee this team is intended to work over the summer timeframe. So ideally, any kind of seating of the team would happen in the May timeframe, which is out of sequence with what our usual appointments are, which happen, with the solicitation of volunteers starting in September, with the appointments happening in October. And then also the idea that if one of these members is a member of an existing committee, like planning, like the P&E committee or Arts Commission, that's happening out of sync as well, right? So their seating would either be in the future or it would happen, with the existing members. And then what happens when they decide not to be part of that committee anymore? Are they no longer part of the team? So this is intended to be an informal committee. This is something that, we can always revise later if there's an issue. I prefer to keep it informal and keep it under the coordination of the events coordinator for the staff, and I feel comfortable with that. However, if we'd want to, in addition to coming up with the timing for when these appointments would happen, what the structure would that be? Would we have go through the normal application process? If council was seating that, it seems, like we'd have to have some sort of process versus just expressing interest and going to the staff and making sure that they are part of that team. So that's my recommendation. Though I fully understand if council wants to take a more active role in seating, but I just want to caution that we do have to overcome some of these challenges of it's not happening at the same time typically as the committee seating, because we have to wait for the committees to be seated and appointed before we actually can seat this, and the timing of when this team is active is primarily over the summertime. So but with that, open up for council discussion. Councilmember Rosenberg.
So the last time this was presented to council, it was council would make an appointment in May, and now it's that the communications coordinator would make that decision with the oversight of the city manager. Why is doing an appointment in May hard for any city council?
The language actually said that it had to be worded in a way. It said appointments shall occur after the Parks and Environmental Committee and the Arts Commission have held their first, because if you're needing team members from those committees, those committees need to meet and then select their volunteers, and then it just makes it very complicated when this
Change the wording.
What?
Change the wording. If it's complicated as to how the wording is set up, change the wording.
So, well, again, this is meant to be informal. It's meant to be, you don't have to be a member of those committees. You can just be a resident volunteer that wants to be on the team. And since it does not fall under the rules and structures of our advisory committees, we just don't feel the need for city council to, upon further thought, I do not feel the need for city council to make appointments to this team, and its rules has been very good about appointing them to those committees.
So what happens if there are two people that never get off the team and somebody else wants to volunteer, and it's just strictly volunteer, it's not appointed? Caitlin, our communications coordinator, decides who gets on, and there's hurt feelings because they feel they never get a chance to help or volunteer. What happens then?
Well, are you saying they wouldn't get a chance to be a member of the team, or they wouldn't get a chance to participate? So my guess is that, again, it's up to the communications events coordinator under supervision of my position. We would probably just let whoever wants to be on the team be on the team, unless there was some sort of issue that we could then bring up the chain of command. But I think the whole point is to keep this flexible and open, and whoever wants to participate, we would allow them to be members of the team. This, again, because this is not a committee, you could be, for example, on 2 committees and still be a member of this team, because it's outside of the structure of our advisory committees.
So you could actually be on 3.
You could be on the zoning commission and be a part of this team.
So, really?
Yeah, because it's outside the parameters that we've set up in Chapter 31 for advisory bodies.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Thank you.
Councilmember Medicus.
So the way I understand this, basically a group of volunteers that are going to work with logistics on our events for the city, so that we're not stepping on each other's toes when one committee wants to do this event, another event, and then you don't know that they're planning an event. So calendarizing our events so everybody can plan well, I think, is what I'm understanding this is about.
And also, it serves some additional purposes. So in talking about the restructuring and how, we realize that with a city of our size and structure, economic development really isn't a good fit for an advisory committee. But there's that community aspect, right? That was the community aspect that I know members of CED and some other residents that spoke to me, they were concerned about what happens to the community aspect of CED. I feel that with this structure, and just in my years of being involved with the city and with CED, I feel that event planning, and especially event execution, is hard to do in a committee format where you have to make motions and then you have to worry about quorums and taking minutes. It's much easier just to say, hey, I need volunteers for this event. However, there needs to be structure, right? There needs to be oversight, especially where the budget is concerned, and so that's what I feel we've created with outlining the team where they meet in the summer. They propose a draft calendar. It doesn't mean that just because an event doesn't make it to that calendar, and it doesn't mean that that calendar is set in stone, but it's like you said, it's making sure that we're not having conflicting events, and that the bandwidth isn't all being used, in 1 month or one time of year, but it's still following the city procedures as regards to budget. So the team, under supervision of the staff, will go and present to Budget and Finance, just like the committees do, for their budget request. And then their Budget and Finance Committee makes a recommendation, and ultimately the budget, including the events budget, is approved by City Council. And I think another important part too is, and this is something, the feedback that we got from the current members of CED, was that if there are, we want to make sure we don't lose, sort of signature events, like making sure that that Spring Fling and some of these other events continue, year after year and grow and possibly change. But also if there's ideas for new events. So this team allows for that.
Councilor Burrow.
I have a question about the leadership of the team. I see it says staff will coordinate the team's activities. Does that mean that staff will be effectively leading, coordinating, running the show as far as meetings and scheduling and the pragmatics of the committee?
Yes, effectively, yes. Staff, specifically the communications and events coordinator. But there will also be a representative. I think it's very crucial to have a representative from each department there, both Public Works and Public Safety, especially Public Works, because oftentimes it's the Public Works staff that ends up having to run logistics of these events, and it's important to include that in the cost and the planning of city events.
So what I remember, the goal was to limit having 5 formal committees because it was taking so much staff time. So we're going down to 4 formal committees, and then this very flexible team event, and Caitlin is going to take that on during the summer. How long do you expect the volunteers, as far as the summer, starting in May, let's say, do they work until October No, the budget has to be done by August. So May through August they would meet and work on the calendar, or do you think it could be done sooner?
So generally, I see this in the future as being 2 meetings, sort of 1 meeting to come together and talk about what or perhaps they can get it all done in 1. We're gonna, if the team is approved, we have a tentative date of next Tuesday night to meet, but it would need to be submitted. The Budget and Finance Committee, typically how our schedule works is the last meeting in June for Budget and Finance is when committee and other sort of external applicants like hot fund grants, so kind of the non-departmental expense requests get discussed and ultimately recommended at that meeting. So ideally, yes, these planning meetings for the team would happen in May, late May, early June, and hopefully 1-2 meetings. Then the draft calendar is created, and the budget request is finalized.
Okay.
And brought to Budget and Finance by hopefully a member or 2 of the team, along with the communications and events coordinator.
And the reason I ask that is to know, are we still freeing up staff, or are we putting a lot of work on staff?
I would say that this structure, and Caitlin can attest this, and maybe the city secretary too, we would no longer be, this would be, again, it's a public meeting, it's open to all. It would be posted on the city calendar, but it would not have an agenda, meaning, we're not involving the city secretary, we're not having to post the agenda and minutes on Laserfish. So yeah, I would argue that this is a simpler meeting to organize and to run than a committee.
I agree as well. I kind of already attend every committee meeting already and, have an idea for their events. So I think this kind of streamlines the process where we're all getting together. I think too, when you come together in October and then they start planning out their meetings, it seems like every few meetings we're talking about events and it's taking up a lot of their time. So I really think this will also help the committee meetings run a little faster and, kind of prioritize the events all together. So I'm honestly really excited about it. I think it'll be a really good umbrella to kind of put all events together, get everybody in the same room and chatting about events. So I'm really excited to take on the process.
Great. Thank you.
So other questions about this? There's also under consideration the proposed changes to the P&E committee, as well as adopting the purpose statements for the 4 standing committees. That's part of the ordinance as well. So we'll keep council discussion, and then I'll open up for public comments, but any other council discussion before I move to the public? All right, so this time I invite members of the public to speak to this agenda item. And just as a reminder, please limit your comments to 4 minutes, since we are running late and we have other agenda items that we need to get to as well. Thank you.
Okay, Burton Pearson, 39 Pillow Road. I just want to ask, were there, I believe there were, right, in the public forum, citizen comments about changing the planning function from P&E? How many people were in favor and how many were against in the public comment on the forum?
I saw 3 comments. All 3 of them did not wish to change the name of the P&E from the current planning and environmental to the parks and environmental.
How many people, I'm sorry?
There were 3 comments that I saw on Engagement HQ.
Yeah, and no comments that said that they wanted to make this change, is that right?
I didn't see any comments when I checked at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, thanks. I was one of the members of P&E when we voted for this. I was uncomfortable at the time we voted, and my uncomfortableness has continued to grow since we did vote. And I'm going to read you my comment because it didn't actually come in until right at 5 o'clock. I'm requesting that the city retain the planning function for Planning and Environmental Committee. Staff has made our committee aware of the fact that some other cities locate the planning function under the auspices of the Zoning Commission. However, I believe that the City of Austin has completely separated the Planning and Zoning Commissions. They differ in their membership and structure, and they perform different functions. The City of Sunset Valley is very unique in that we have a very strong commitment to conservation and restoration. In fact, I believe that we are near the cutting edge of municipal conservation and restoration. I think we're becoming a real leader in this. It's one of the main reasons that it's good to be here. Because of this very uniqueness, we recognize that most of the planning that municipalities do has environmental impacts on species habitats and therefore on biological diversity. Because of the continual habitat degradation that's continuing every day, we need to continue as much as possible to include the latest research and best practices supported by that research in our planning decisions. It's not the function of the Zoning Commission to keep up with the latest biological research. Therefore, it's imperative, if best practices are to prevail, that the Planning and Environmental Committee be able to provide best practices information to the Zoning Commission as land use issues are being decided. At the moment they're being decided, not later, but at the moment, they need to be part of the discussion for any of the land use things that we talk about. Because we're just not now and in the future, it's just going to become more and more critical all the time that we take care. Thanks so much.
I'm Helen Bessie. I remember that P&E meeting, and I remember the vote. Frankly, I don't remember how I voted, but I really have great concerns about having zoning and planning together, because when you have one committee who is doing the planning and then a zoning commission that has so much power to actually make that zoning happen, you're putting a lot of power in one little small group of people. And that I find very disturbing. I did look up, I mean, for years, I'll say 40 years, I've always thought City of Austin had a planning commission, planning and zoning commission, it was all one thing. They're not. As Burton said, they're completely separate. And so you have the planning folks are, I think there's 15 people on the planning commission. I had it on my phone, but I lost it. And on zoning, there's 6 or something like that. Totally different commissions, committees, totally different functions. And I think you're going to really have a problem, or a possible problem, with folks who are planning and already know how they're going to vote for the zoning. It doesn't give enough input from the rest of the residents. So, and I don't care if it's in environmental or not. That doesn't matter to me, but it needs to be separate from zoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this on? Hi. Ross Ponder, 1030 Sunflower Trail. I didn't comment earlier. I love the idea of reusing some stone for those signs. And there might be some coming up on Four Pillow if we could salvage some. They got a contract now. But to the matter at hand, I am all for kind of operational efficiency. And so if it helps the events get done better and more quickly, yay, let's do that thing. I do have some reservations about planning and zoning being one. During our, we recently went before the zoning commission, and one of the commissioners commented frequently about their work on planning and the environmental commission, and they both do important work, but the jobs that they're there for are different. And I think it's just going to be very important to get some accountability built into the system, such that a small group of commissioners don't railroad something that might not be in everybody's best interest. And I do love that we are an environmentally conscious city. It's one of the, yes, it's one of the reasons that it's good to be here. Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I got recruited to planning and environmental, which is not a place I would have gone because I think they do a great job. But at that time, there was a real push towards development at all fronts, and dramatically changing who we have been up until this point. And I really agree that if it hadn't been separate, that a lot of things that I think make it good to be here might have changed. And so I would agree that I think it's too much of a consolidation of power. I appreciate that they're going to do the LDC, the Land Development Code, as an ad hoc group. I think that's a great idea if that goes through. But the skill sets of people who serve on zoning are really special. They'll sit there and they will listen to me, incredibly boring. And I sit here, and I have a high capacity for, tedious things we do over and over. But that's a level apart for me. I mean, and it's a real skill set for that. And then the people who talk about plans, there's a whole different personality. And I'm concerned about the loss of what happens when we consolidate that, because we're all volunteers, you know, and I just think things are gonna, if you have one mentality, then other things are gonna get lost. And it's a lot of work, and you're limited to 5 people on zoning. So then you have these big weighty things, and you've got a 3-2 vote on them. So I think that's a really challenging thing. So anyway, not in favor of that change, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Other members of the public that wish to speak at this time? All right, so council, open it back up for discussion or possible motions. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. So most everything else in here, I'm cool with. I'm the person that is not involved in P&E, and I'm the one that's saying I think that they should keep the planning in there. And I know it feels a little strange for someone outside to kind of like say that. And but the thing is, like, we have like the comments that are on the engagement HQ and the people that have commented here all seem to want to keep that there. And I'm amenable to like their suggestions that it seems like you put everything into zoning, and maybe that's too much power in one spot or whatever. I remain optimistic that we will continue in Sunset Valley to run things past multiple committees. And I also think, and this is optimistic yet pessimistic, that if you got a situation where I'm calling it P&Z wants to jam something through, and there's a council that wants to do it as well, then like environmentally we're kind of, that ship has sailed, you know. So we're all in this together until we're not, and then it's just kind of whatever. The land development code, I do believe, will just be done by an ad hoc committee. It's going to be too much work. It's going to take a very long time. So I believe members of the current P&E that want to be involved in that should definitely get on that committee, or like, put themselves forward for that. But again, the people have self-sorted into these committees, and in 1 year, just to say like the planning side is, and my wife is on planning and environmental, like she is not interested in the planning side. That's one person. There's other people that are. I know one other member of that committee that is not really interested in that side. And like once the, what was the other thing that you guys worked on? The, you're working on for like 2 years.
Comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan, thank you, sorry. They said that it's like if that was what it was all the time, they would not be on that committee. So it's just like there's some people that you will lose if planning stays in there, but it for some reason just feels right to have them separated. I don't know, especially zoning being capped at 5. It's just, and I know we only have 5, and we have like 2, or how many alternates do we have right now?
0. We need
0 alternates. So I'm just like a little conflicted on it, and I just don't know.
And just as a reminder, we're not making a decision on the planning and zoning this evening. That requires amending the land development code. So, if council decides to go through with the changes proposed in Chapter 31, including the P&E name change and purpose statement update that was recommended by the committee, we could have a discussion at the next meeting about how we wish to proceed. Maybe the city wants to look at having a planning commission in addition to a zoning commission. That is an option. It's typically not done in smaller cities, but hey, we're Sunset Valley, we're unique.
I would assume Councilmember Rosengarten, then Mayor Pro Tem will do that work.
I was going to say, why don't we pull community engagement out for just tonight and work on the P&E and zoning another night, which is what I anticipated the agenda was tonight. So with community engagement team, we could just vote on that as whether or not we want that to happen for CED. And since there's 4 people who spoke about the planning issues with P&E, that we might research that a little further.
I certainly think the only time critical one is the CED decision because we want to make sure that that falls within the budget cycle. The other ones, really, we want to do in alignment with our appointments and making sure that we don't run into something where if we don't do it before the appointments, then we have to wait another year. So if we do wait, that's fine for those. I agree. We would want to move forward with some decision about CED so that we can proceed with that framework if we're going to move forward with that. So, Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to say the exact same thing that Councilmember Rosengarten said. I think we have a consensus about dissolving CED and having the community engagement team. So why don't we just do that and then talk in our next meeting about what we want to do with P&E and with the zoning commission.
Councilmember Burrell.
If you move, Matt, if you could move back down where you were, where the bullets were, and on the, I think it's maybe on the next page down, somewhere here there were bullets of what we were.
This is the ordinance. Were you referring to the right here?
Here, right here.
Yeah.
I agree with what's being discussed here. Basically, my understanding would be that we would be looking at potentially a motion and approval for bullet number 2 and bullet number 4, and then to move more slowly at another meeting to discuss perhaps some more detail bullets 1 and 3.
Yeah, although I would say bullet 3 doesn't substantially make any alterations from what is existing language that's on the website, I believe. Correct. So there's still a reference to planning there, but just in the spirit of making sure that we're being comprehensive.
So perhaps
so like public
bullet
safety,
1.
for example, all those are not really part of the feedback we've gotten, but it's appropriate, I think, probably to revisit at the same time. There's not a hurry to adopt those changes at this point. So. Councilor Medicus.
So as the liaison for P&E, I just want to say that there were a lot of people, it was kind of split. Some people didn't want to have to go through all those tedious documents and didn't feel like they had the expertise to do that and would rather focus on the environment and parks. And they spent quite a bit of time actually on the purpose statement, which was really important to them, that included the planning word in their purpose. So whatever the title is, the purpose is really what they're supposed to follow, is the purpose. And maybe for tonight, we just leave that as planning and environmental, and we can come back to that later. But that was the committee, this is what the committee is recommending, that it be changed and that this be the purpose. So I just have to represent what they voted for.
Further discussion? If there's a motion, then that can open up for another round of discussion for potentially public input, but I'm hesitant to keep reopening it. Mayor Pro Tem, I saw your hand first.
I make a motion.
Your mic's off.
Motion to approve an ordinance amending Chapter 31 relating to standing committees and the creation of a community engagement team with the changes we discussed, leaving out the parts about planning and environmental.
So the motion is to adopt the ordinance, but I think we want to make sure that we're adopting the right sections. So we would delete that phrase. We would remove the and then we'd remove the purpose statements for the time being.
Right. Item number 4 and the purpose statement number 4.
I guess we could leave in the other ones if we wanted to.
I'm sorry?
I guess we could leave in the other ones if we wanted to, and just leave 4 out.
If we're revisiting, we might as well take.
Revisit. Okay, let's take all of them out. Yeah,
I'd like to work on budget and finances.
Sure. Okay. And then the rest of it can stay in as far as the language?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
so,
that.
So with those changes, that would be part of the motion.
Does everyone want to look at the ordinance? So it has the whereases relating to events, recruiting the current members of CED. It removes CED and 31.15. We are not editing 31 point. And then we're adding section 31.40.
Is that an agreement with the motion maker?
Yes.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. That opens up for further discussion. Council, I'm going to let the public get another round of comments now that we have a motion in place. So if any members of the public wish to speak to the agenda item again in light of the motion, please do so.
Thank you, Helen Bessie again. I just want to remind you that when you're on a commission, you're not, zoning commission. When you're on a commission, you're not allowed to serve on any other standing committee. So by making it a zoning and planning commission, you're limiting those people to doing that, and they can't then serve on some other committee. I don't know if that matters, but it seems like it would have some importance.
Thank you.
This is just very quick. At that meeting, when we were deciding whether to retain that function, a number, 3 or 4 of the committee members did say that they'd been through a planning function before. They found it very stressful. They didn't want to go through it again. And yet those very members volunteered to be on the committee. And to me, it seems if you don't really feel like you're comfortable with the functions of a committee, then it is your responsibility to resign from that committee, not to really say, well, let's make this committee have a different function. For example, some of them said they really just would rather be planning events like the predatory bird flyover or movie nights. And the environmental committee is a very serious committee, has a very powerful charge to protect the environment in Sunset Valley for your children, your grandchildren. And it's a very serious commitment. And so if people do feel that it's too much trouble, then I will, say it might be good if they moved over to and did some of this event planning and let the environmental committee go ahead and do their full, and planning committee, the environmental and planning committee, do their full job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I just think that when we have a really big thing, like the LDC, and that is something that's really good to do ad hoc, because it is really different. It really did take a year. And so I think that that's what people didn't anticipate signing up for. So I just think that's really potentially the solution, is that if you have something that's really intense, like the LDC, comprehensive plans like that, ad hoc committee. And that to me is the solution, because then people weren't overburdened. And so, and you also get that sort of nerd factor, that people who want to do the nerdy thing, and they'll go do it. And there are not that many of us, So I think that that's just a thing to consider. And that lightens everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Medicus?
Clarification on, I think it's only BOA that restricts service on another committee, because we've had people that have been on the Arts Commission.
So it's
also.
The zoning commission, it specifically states in chapter 31 that you may not serve on a committee. It doesn't, there's kind of a loophole with the Arts Commission. So that same,
because it's a commission.
for whatever reason, that is not in the Arts Commission section. So I think you can be on zoning and BOA and be on the Arts Commission. You cannot be a member of either of those bodies, the Zoning Commission or the Board of Adjustment, and be on a committee.
A standing committee.
Yeah, and just as a reminder too, the Zoning Commission is not a legislative body. Only the BOA is quasi-judicial. So if a BOA makes a decision and somebody wants to appeal, it goes to the court. The Zoning Commission makes recommendations to the City Council. They don't make final decisions, just as a reminder.
Clarification.
All right, any further discussion on this before we take a vote on the motion? All right, and just to be clear, this motion is to make amendments to Chapter 31 related to standing committees, specifically an ordinance adopting changes to remove the Community Engagement, Community and Economic Development CED committee from the list of standing committees and add a new section, section 31.40, community engagement team established as the new ordinance is. Those are the only changes we're making with this motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, and we will be bringing back the other topics at a future council meeting so that we can make a decision in alignment if we're going to make changes before we seat the new committees. So thank you, council, and thank you for members of the public that came to speak to this. We're going to move on to our next agenda. We don't need to do agenda number 12 because with the language we adopted, it is now going to be coordinated with the communications events coordinator. So we can move right on to agenda item number 13. Councilor Rosengart.
Could we take a break?
We can take yes, at the request of the council, let's take a 5-minute break. I apologize for going late for everybody who's sticking around for these other items. But let's plan on taking a quick break. We'll reconvene at 8:32. All right. Sorry for the slightly extended break, but we're going to resume our agenda items with agenda item number 13. Presentation and possible action on the schematic design for the Uplands Park. And so council, before I hand this over to staff, what I really want from council tonight is clear direction on what you want to do for this upcoming fiscal year. If there's a direction to move forward with the schematic design, what are the parameters of that design that council is comfortable moving forward with so that it's clear to the team working on that what the boundaries are. If there's a budget that you have idea in mind, if it's contingent on grant funding or potential grant funding, if that's something that council wants to provide direction on, what are the major features that everybody wants to move forward with? If there are concerns about moving forward with anything at all, that's obviously another path forward as well. I firmly believe that this engagement process, going back all the way to 2010 when the land was acquired, has gone through so many iterations, and the most recent iteration has resulted in a refinement of that whole process, distilling it down to some core essential concepts, that it is in council's hands at this point. This is the process. The public can make input. They do not decide. It is council. That's what you're elected for. If council decides to move forward with something and you are in agreement and you make a motion and it's a majority vote, that's your decision. You have this input that you've received from multiple sources, both at the community meeting that was held, with the various constituents that reached out to you directly or talked with you directly, the whole history of the project going back now 15 years for Uplands planning, and many of you have a history of the city going back that far. Council has that information. You have the financial interest of the city in mind as well, knowing that whatever price tag is on this is also going to have to be considering maintenance cost and what that looks like, and the value of the city of having something on the site versus not having something on the site, especially major features. So what I'm really looking for is clear direction so that if we are going to move forward with something in this year's budget cycle, that we have that as part of our budget, and that gets back and brought as part of our budget adoption. With that said, what I'm hoping that we can go through tonight are the major kind of plan that we saw last time. Staff will note some of the changes, including the repositioning of the pavilion. However, going and looking at this plan, which has been through several committees, it was part of our discussion last time, what major features council wants to evaluate or potentially move forward with as far as direction to any kind of engineering contract that we come into. We also have members of SSC here tonight to present some potential grant funding information which might influence council's decisions as far as major features and also the benefits that it brings to that organization. So they will be able to provide, I think, a brief introduction in terms of an overview of those grants that they've identified that we could potentially apply for, that they could even help assist with that application. And of course, we have Mend here not doing a new presentation because they finished their work, but they can answer questions with regards to any updates that council wants to follow up with. So with that, I will hand it over to staff. And just as a note for council and residents, we do have and part of our ordinance that if we need to continue our council meeting past 9 o'clock, we will need to pause for a motion to do that, given that this is an item that may take up that much time. Just during the conversation, I may have to pause this to ask for a motion to proceed past 9 o'clock so we can continue with our remaining agenda items. So, staff.
Thank you, Mayor. So, as the Mayor said, what we're really seeking tonight is council direction on how and what aspects of this plan to move forward. It has been proposed that a task order for construction documents be part of the FY26 budget, and so what would help Mend and Freeland Turk as well would be what elements of this conceptual plan does City Council want to move forward with. This was taken to the Planning and Environment. After the last time this was presented to Council, it was taken to the Planning and Environmental Committee and the Public Works Committee. That feedback was provided in the backup. I don't believe there's been any additional changes other than this is an updated design package that doesn't have the overflow parking. That is no longer part of the plan. So yes, as to echo the mayor, I think we're really looking for council direction on what aspects of this plan, everything, parts of it, do we want to move forward with? And I'll go ahead and hand it over to SFC, who has been working with us and informing the city of some potential grant opportunities.
No.
Hi.
Okay. My name is Amy Gallo. I'm here from Sustainable Food Center. We run the market here. So I'm here to just talk about 3 funding opportunities that we've been investigating that we believe will really support our mutual goals. One, it really lists SFC as sort of the primary beneficiary, but positions us for more long-term success, while the other 2 could directly support capital improvements to the park plan. So the first opportunity that we're seeking is a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program grant, an FMPP, to build the capacity of Sunset Valley Farmers Market as we prepare for this transition from a temporary pop-up setup to a permanent city-supported site. The project we're proposing is in partnership with the City of Sunset Valley, and it's designed to ensure that the market is ready to scale and thrive in its future home. So this grant will allow SFC to strengthen vendor recruitment, deepen our community engagement, and support operational needs like market improvements and market manager training, which are all critical to positioning the market for success in the new space. We will also use funds to reduce immediate cost burdens through temporary infrastructure improvements during the transition period. The max award for this is $250,000 over 3 years. The opportunity comes with a 25% matching requirement, which SFC would be able to provide through our revenue earned from booth fees. But the grant application is due June 27th, so it's a pretty quick turnaround on our behalf. And again, that's would really only cover like sort of soft costs and one-time investment costs for this capacity improvement plan. The second opportunity is that we'd like to leverage additional federal funding in the community by applying to the Healthy Food Financing Initiative's FAIR Fund. This grant can support infrastructure-related costs, including the installation of permanent structures, provided that they align with the program's objectives to enhance access to healthy food in underserved communities. Looking through it, allowable costs include construction hard costs, such as building permanent market structures, acquisition of land or buildings, which can encompass spaces for market operations, pre-development activities, including architectural design and site planning, and one-time soft costs, such as community engagement and environmental assessments. These expenditures are intended to support projects that process, distribute, aggregate, market, and sell healthy, fresh, and affordable foods to underserved communities and markets. So we're really integral to the application process, that it would be for a partnership between City of Sunset Valley and the farmers market. We're an obvious fit. I feel really confident that we could secure an award if we put forth a joint application. The max award amount from HFFI, there are a few different options, is up to $250,000 for an implementation grant, which is what I would suggest going after initially. But for the City of Sunset Valley, they also have low-cost loans between $500,000 and $5 million. So if that was something y'all wanted to pursue additionally, we could talk about that. For the grant purpose, there are no matching funds required, which is great. This is a pass-through of USDA funding, so there is a lot of paperwork and reporting associated with all of this, which I think we can also handle, as our organization currently handles about $16 million in federal funding right now. The initial request on this one is due August 4th, so we do have a little bit more time to put together a proposal that really addresses all of the concerns that we might have going forward. And I've been talking to Matt about this. I think this is a really good opportunity for us to pick a piece of this park plan, including improving shade structures or improving access to, seated areas or something that would benefit the park when the market's not there and benefit the market when the market is popped up on Saturdays. Our third option is that we're really open to exploring a joint capital campaign to search for a donor who can provide that initial investment into the infrastructure costs. We've been working with a consultant through our development team for the past 18 months, and they have suggested that we seek a corporate or private donor in the $100,000 to $150,000 a year range for market support. And with the impressive park investment that y'all are planning, we're really eager to find an aligned donor that could provide some of that upfront cost. So that is obviously has no due date, but on a rolling basis, we would love to begin working on some sort of a joint capital campaign. I just wanted to bring this up to y'all tonight to showcase that we really want to approach this opportunity with a lot of gratitude and reciprocity. And just mention again that SFC has nonprofit status, so we're able to go after opportunities like this that are not typically open to municipalities. So if there were other opportunities that you think we could both benefit from, we're really happy to explore what those look like. And I also just want to shout out Matt, because he's been working really closely with us on this, and I've been really happy to have just like a friendly and responsive face in the city of Sunset Valley. I think we've been thriving lately, and it's really due to the support that y'all have been giving us. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that offer of partnership, because I think it's been a partnership that we've had, and it's an opportunity for us to grow that partnership, that benefits, the FSC as well as the community, and it benefits the city, because, I think that we want a kind of a showcase of this site that takes its purpose while preserving its natural space as much as possible. So, but I think those are all, those sound very exciting to me, just in terms of opportunities. And so I think that's something that council can weigh as they decide, whether we move forward with aspects of this project or not. But I think it's always helpful to know that there's a way to potentially supplement the city's investment with grant funding, or maybe even corporate or private donations that that could bring more of this plan into reality. Any questions for SFC about the grant opportunities before? I don't want you to be the sole purpose, person up there. But any follow-up questions for SFC before we move into more general discussion? Councilmember Mendigas.
Not a question, but I just want to thank you for the, I think it's great to have public and private partnerships, and I would love to see the market continue to grow. I love the new layout. It looks great. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for bringing those ideas to us.
Yeah, of course.
And if we, I think we'll continue with the discussion for the rest of the aspects of the planning that we're going to be doing. So appreciate that. All right, so council, as we said, there's certainly, I think, several possible ways that we could move forward with this. There's a potential that we could have additional funding to supplement whatever the city invests. However, one of the things that we did talk about was, if we are going to be starting to move forward on this within the current budget planning, we'd want to have at least a initial task order scoped out for the budget, and then as part of the budget adoption, it would be formalized. Staff did, I think, have an updated overview in the back up that showed the new location, or a new kind of slightly revised location due to the utility easement that's part of the streets that Master Sergeant Horgan's there. I had a chance to go out there and actually look at it, where it's painted. So I appreciate staff, taking the time to do that, just so you could get a more physical idea of what that pavilion as proposed in the original or the current, plan looks like. However, Public Works also made several comments or discussion about potentially value engineering that, and there's possibilities of resizing that as well. But essentially, one of the things that did change from our last discussion in our May meeting is that a recognition that there is a utility line that goes through the street, so you can't build directly on the street, and so you'd have to move it over, which would impact some of the existing site. However, you would be replanting or turning that that street that would be unoccupied by the pavilion into a natural state. So, Councilor Rosengard, you had your hand raised as the next person in line.
Yes. First off, as council members, we want to be very open and transparent. And to be open and transparent, we have to make sure we know and understand the process. So as council, we asked Mint Collaborative to bring us some plans, 3 schematic plans that would then bring some ideas together. From there, we would then consolidate some of the ideas. The 3 plans were the plaza, the arcade, and the pavilion. And the majority of people were standing over by the plaza, which was also the least expensive one. And the majority of people voted for that, I'm assuming, because it was the least expensive, and it was the least invasive to the uplands plan. Such as myself, I voted for the plaza. Well, then it was shared with us at council that some folks took their sticky notes of liking the pavilion and moved it over to the plaza, not the plaza, I'm sorry. Yes, the plaza, which had no covered entity at all. The arcade had covered shading, but did not have a pavilion. So when they moved their sticky note from liking the pavilion on the pavilion diagram to the plaza diagram, it pretty well took away my vote, is what I'm trying to explain to everybody. And that's not open and transparent, because when I voted with the plaza having no shaded structure on it. I did not go back and look at all the sticky notes. I simply knew that I looked at the plaza and I liked it the way it was, and I put my vote on. And your vote, for those of you who weren't there, you put a red dot on the front of the fabric that was hanging over the table. And there were 13 red dots there. Now, if that affects me this way, how many other of the 13 dots were thinking the same thing, that they voted for the plaza with no shaded structure, but then someone put a sticky note on the plaza and now made it a pavilion schematic, which is not what I voted for. So if there's 3 designs, plaza, arcade, plaza had no covering, no shade. Arcade had shaded structure, inexpensive. The third one had a pavilion, which was almost $2 million for the pavilion. So the majority of people were over at number 1, but now all of a sudden we end up with an expensive schematic plan versus number 1, which was an inexpensive schematic plan. So I'm very worried that we're not going down the path of transparency, because I was there and I don't feel that my vote mattered, because the minute that sticky note was assumed as 13 people want that, it took away my vote of no shading. And I'm not against a pavilion if that's what all 13 people wanted. The majority of the people who went to that table, did they want a pavilion? And so that's where my hesitation is on this. Then you go to the P&E committee and you go to the Public Works committee. It was shared with me that P&E felt like they were not given the same instructions as the Public Works committee was given. If you look at the notes tonight in the backup, you can see that Public Works, and I'm grateful for them, gave a lot of good new ideas with some less expensive shading ideas. One of them, Plan 1, 2, 3, 4, and then some from 5 and some from 10, I believe. And so with that, again, it feels like there isn't open and transparency when we even took it to the committees. And Carolyn, I heard you. I am also hearing the committee member, and I'm trying to drop. So if the instructions are given to both committees the same way, and the instructions are given the night of the schematic plan design presentation, some of us evidently didn't understand the instructions, because I've also talked to another person, on 2 other people on the same event, and they said they too didn't know that you could do that. The most expensive schematic plan and move it to the least expensive schematic plan. Thank you for listening.
So Council, we're going to need to take a motion to extend our meeting past 9 o'clock, if we could do that before opening up for further discussion.
Sure, yeah, I move we extend the meeting for no more than 1 hour.
Correct.
10 o'clock?
Second.
Second. All those in favor of extending the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say
Aye.
nay. All right. Go ahead, Councilmember Johnson.
Oh, that's what I was going to do, actually. But I also have another note. I want to, that was something that was run by MEND, correct? Sticky notes and dots and everything else. It's not super technical. I want to hear your vibe of the situation on that. But before that, the graduations, and Chief